We are now live. Welcome back to Dear Younger Me, the Dear Younger Me podcast, where we ask the questions that you've always wanted to ask, and we have the conversation that you've always wanted to have. We are your hosts, Nikki Johnson, aka Coach Nick, and Miss Rhoda Love, our Kiwi from, did I say it right? Our
Yes.
Kiwi from New Zealand. As you guys come in, please say something so we can say something back to you. And if not, we just thank you and appreciate you for joining us and supporting us on this our season finale episode. Your support, your comments, your emails, your questions have been so appreciated. And we thank you guys so very, very much. Rhoda, how have you been since we saw you last week?
I've been great. Thank you, Coach. And I'm super excited for today, season 1 finale. It's been an amazing season. So I'm very happy right now.
That it has been. Y'all, we have a special show today. We're going to be talking about taking a stand against domestic violence. And we have two amazing women that are going to be joining us. We're going to introduce them to you momentarily. Is there anything else you want to say to the DYMP gang before we get started?
Thank you so much to everyone who's been watching us for the past 11 weeks. It's been amazing coming on live and chatting with you guys. We appreciate all the feedback, the support, the prayers, the comments. It's been a truly great honor to do Dear Younger Me podcast season 1. So I appreciate all my DYMP gang from all around the world. God bless you.
All righty. With that said, how about you introduce our first guest? We can bring the queens on and get this conversation started.
Let's go. So, guys, I want to tell you today about my favorite therapist, who I call Dr. Rhonda Dickens. She is a North Carolina native who currently holds licensure as a licensed clinical social worker. She's the clinical director at Rising Hope Clinical Assistance, providing therapeutic guidance to her counseling team and outpatient psychotherapy to clients. Her therapeutic journey began in 2012 after completing a missions trip where she learned firsthand that many children and adults survive off a diet full of pain and are given no access to pain medicine therapeutic skills to handle the pressures of life. So Rhonda vowed to be one to change that. Dr. Rhonda believes everyone enters the world as blank slates and facets of life begin to write our stories. Many of our stories have been written by nature versus nurture, childhood and environmental trauma, ineffective coping skills, inability to understand or manage life triggers, and overall frustrations, life stresses, and pain. However, despite what facets of life has written into our stories, with help, we can all learn not only how to become our best selves, but also how to rewrite our stories to reflect who we've become. Dr. Rhonda also writes plays to tackle social justice issues and provide communities with resources necessary to overcome. Welcome to the show, Dr. Rhonda.
For having me.
Alrighty, you are on live. We appreciate you being here with us.
Not a problem at all. It is first an honor to be on the podcast. The title alone, I was already hooked. You had me at hello when you said Dear Younger Me. So thank you for allowing me. So it's an honor to be on it, but it's even more honor to be a part of this particular series where we're really tackling something that has been plaguing a lot of women. I think that it is overdue time for us to just talk about it and specifically talk to our younger selves. And I want us to take this time to give some healing to some people that we may not have gotten when we were at that age. So I am all on board and so happy to be a part.
Thank you, Dr. Dickens.
Okay, wait, time out. I have to say this. I always get called Dr. Dickens, and I think it's prophetic in the spirit. So know when they're saying doctors that may be prophetic, but right now I am not on a doctor's level yet.
I was gonna say that we're calling her doctor. You know, she ain't ready for it yet, but she,
He's ready to do, right?
that part. All righty. So we have another queen that we're going to introduce to you all at this time. It is Miss Lizzy P. Lawton. Miss Lizzy is a lifelong entrepreneur, licensed cosmetologist, commission prophet, beauty influencer, and woman's empowerment creator, aka the queen of consistency. That's a whole episode by itself. She helps creatives and artists create from a place of purity, works and brands and nonprofits to strategically craft their online presence. And she breaks the boundaries of ministry with her real, raw, and vibrant online presence, y'all. She has such an amazing talk show, a podcast, that is called Phenomenal Women. And we're going to talk to you guys more about that in just a little bit. But she also has a vlog, a YouTube channel called Traveling Wild Mixed. And we're going to hear more about that from her as well. But I'm excited to bring her on so she can tell us a little bit about the work that she is currently doing in the area of domestic violence. So without further ado, let's bring her on right now.
Hey guys.
Welcome, beautiful.
Hello.
I'm so excited to be with you guys. This is such a passion of my heart, and just other women. Like, my whole life revolves around ministry with other women and like the connectivity that God brings us to. So I can't wait to talk about how we can help each other, and all the listeners, to them, to get some like tips on how to navigate in, during, after, before, all that,
All of it.
All of that. So we had some fire emojis and some hello beauties from, I think it's Tanel and Tawanda. Thank y'all for joining. All of those who are watching, y'all can help us right now by please sharing this to your page. Send it to someone in their DM. Let them know about this conversation. It's a very important conversation. It's not just for women, because there are men going through domestic violence situations as well. And then there are people that are not directly being affected as far as them being abused, but they have been in past relationships. They watch their parents, they watch loved ones. So we want to include everyone in on this conversation. These women are going to pour into us today, and y'all can help us with that by posting it on your page. With that being said, Lizzy, tell us what you do in the area of working with families or people that are involved in domestic violence.
Yeah, so I literally, it's hard to describe because it's so out of the box sometimes, but I literally go and get people from abuse. And I specifically don't put them in a shelter. Even right now, I have someone with me who is rescued from being in a basement for over 10 years. And so she currently lives with me. I've rescued families of children and women in this way. And so I pour my life and Jesus into them, by doing life with them on a daily basis, or building a community of other women, or finding them settled with a family member that's safe. It's very hands-on. I, kind of accidentally bumped into this as a prophet, and there was a lot of women that came running to me, and they would say like, "Hey, this is my story," or "This is what's going on," and it was very basic. And then it became like, oh, well, God doesn't want you to stay there. And so I raised funds for those families so that they also don't have the least of anything in the world. They don't get secondhand, they don't get hand-me-downs or sleeping on floors and couches, because I believe that women are daughters of the King, and that our Father owns a cattle on 1,000 hills. And so if I can go shopping where I prefer to go, then I should be putting these families in the most deserving of positions, because they didn't do anything to cause this to happen in their world. So that's like the foundation of what I do. It's much more interpersonal. And so less amount of people, because I don't have a system of funneling through shelters and government funding, but all of it is crowdfunded by other believers in the faith with Jesus.
Queen, we honor you for that, for taking a heart in that I don't want to call it a foundation, I'm gonna call it a movement, for taking a heart into it, because I understand what the type of community activism work that I do. It's a lot of red tape, it's a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of paperwork, it's a lot of rules and regulations, when your heart is just to go and do versus all of these things. I want to ask you two questions. The first is, what started you in this work? And the second question is, you said that you rescued someone from a basement that had been there for 10 years. What do you do in that situation to pour into and help rebuild a life that was in confinement on top of everything else they experienced for 10 years? So let's start with what got you started in this work.
So what got me started is actually from a very young age. I don't know. People have always just told me about their life. You've ever had somebody sit down and just be like, "Hey, I just feel like I could tell you anything," right? And so when I was around 17, 18, and I was in community college, I had a friend in college who was going through a very scary situation, and the violence was actually from her father. And so that was like my first time of ever doing that. But in my family personally, my mother's story before she ever had me involved domestic violence. Some of my aunts, like a lot of just family background history. And so I was always very justice driven about it. Like, no, nobody's going to put their hands on anyone I know. Like, I always just felt this burden about it. So really, it had been something that I feel like God wanted to show as like a generational bloodline, like breaker for me. And that the generations after me wouldn't have to endure it either. So that's how I got started. Just genuinely driven to the place of women always coming to me in that space.
I love that, breaking those curses and those cycles. And the part two, or the second question was, when you have someone that was in confinement for 10 years, going through all kind of abuse, how do you pour into them? How do you begin to help them rebuild their life?
So I think the first thing is to realize that anything that you may see as normal or everyday may not be this person's understanding because of extreme control, because of extreme abuse in multiple levels, like a mental and emotional, even financial. So one of the things that I do in the beginning is tell them, like, there's a lot of freedom that's going to come, but you may have a lot of questions. And so for me, being available to someone almost like every moment of the day, right? Because, like, for instance, this individual lives with me, and they're very competent, right? Have a whole company to themselves, but those everyday questions of, like, can I go outside and do this right now? Right?
Right.
That's the basis of where I start of doing life with them.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, you weren't able to go to the mall. Let's go to the mall together. Right. And it's not like I'm making every decision for them, but I'm there just in case they need to be able to have someone to advocate for them
Yeah.
in the moment, even with themselves when they want to run back. So, a huge part of it is just creating an actual everyday life that makes sense outside of being abused.
Mm-hmm.
That's the baseline of the foundation that I start with.
I love that you partner with them and you walk through life with them in their new normal, helping them to unlearn all the other stuff and then helping them to learn and discover life outside of that. That's a beautiful thing. That's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Honor you so much for that. Rhoda, did you have any questions for her?
For Lizzy. Um, first of all, thank you for what you're doing. Like Coach said, it's just so honorable and amazing. Is there a so do you travel countries to rescue people, or are you usually based in America? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so I think Rhoda's been following me for a long time, right? And so everybody got to watch this very, very big journey I went on. I had normally just been in the United States, and I would go through any of the United States. I've been single for a very, very long time, so I have a very flexible schedule, and so I could pop up, and like there's men that stalk me on the internet that are very angry that I've taken their former victim from them. And so they know I'll roll up, 10 deep, let's go. Like, we're coming for the woman and the kids. But there have been a few people that I have brought across the border. And so I never traveled to their country, but I sponsored some people across the border. Also, anybody is available to travel with me in certain circumstances, and my leaders kind of help shape that for me. So currently I'm in Nairobi, Kenya, and one of the young ladies is with me. But there's other people in California and New York and North Carolina that have all experienced my ministry. So I keep contact with them via online. Sometimes I have group meetings. Other times I'm speaking with them personally. I have a therapist that's on pro bono that works with me. So that's always available to them. Like there's just layers of the way that they're reached through the network around me. But yes, I am willing to go. I'm the person that'll hop on the plane. I've got taken trains. I've moved people by trains, buses, anything that needs to happen. If there's a will, there's a way. And so with me, anywhere you are, like I will come if God tells me to. There have been other instances where I haven't, and I've just talked to someone on the phone during their process of leaving. And then I've connected them to ministries and that local place that will do a version of what I do by offering community to them.
That is powerful.
Absolutely.
So powerful. The work that you do is real brave. It's very brave, and we declare that God is going to continue to keep you and protect you in that area. Rhonda, I want to bring you in on this part because from a clinician point of view, we know that when someone is leaving an abusive relationship, that's one of the most dangerous times. And she going in 10 deep by herself, whatever, with trains, planes, and automobiles, getting people up out of there. But from your experience and the work that you do, talk about that time when someone has made the decision to leave, how dangerous that can be, and what you always or would advise them to do.
So first off, before I go into that, let me just give a moment to say I absolutely love the work that you do. I was sitting over here listening to you. I am like, whoa, this is absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for the work that you do. I see the other side of that work. I see the people that may need you. I see the people that may have had someone like you, and now they're kind of flowing through it and kind of trying to figure out where to go from there. But just being on that ground level and doing that hard work, you are definitely appreciated. And I'm sorry. So to get back to your question, so one of the things that you have to look at is if you're dealing with someone who has been a victim of domestic violence, and when we're talking about domestic violence, people, we're talking about physical abuse, sexual abuse. We're talking about financial abuse. We're talking about neglect. We're talking about an array of different things that can go under the blanket of domestic violence. But when we break it down to the most basic of levels, we're talking about trauma. We're talking about someone who has been traumatized. And one of the things that we know go hand in hand with trauma is what we call survival mode. And I've spoken about this in some of the talks that I give, but because I don't know the audience, I want to break that down just a little bit so that you guys can understand just a few things when it comes to domestic violence. So the first thing that I want to say is that God is absolutely brilliant in the way in which he has wired our bodies, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of times we throw around these buzzwords like survival mode, fight or flight or fawn or freeze, and people just say them and they don't have the understanding as to what that means. So first off, a trauma is a very distressing event that has exceeded your brain's ability to cope. So if we're speaking of domestic violence as a trauma, we are looking at something that has happened to this woman, this man, this child, this person that has exceeded their brain's ability to cope. And so what the brain has done is the brain has said, stop.
Yeah.
It's put us on survival mode and basically turned every emotion off. And one of the reasons that it turns our emotions off is because it doesn't want us to emote those emotions. And for those feelings that are not facts, by the way, feelings aren't facts, folks, those feelings to get in the way of our survival. It's like turn it all off. We need this person to survive. After they survive this, we'll slowly begin to reincorporate that into their spirits and into their lives. So if we're looking at it like that, then what we have to understand is when a woman, when a man, when a child, when a person has been a victim of domestic violence, they go into a mode where their emotions are gone, right? So that they can survive. And so once their emotions are turned all the way off so that they can survive, you have fight mode, which is I'm going to fight my way out of this. You have flight mode, which is I am going to escape this. A lot of times when people hear fight or flight, they think of taking off running, but oftentimes escaping may be enduring, But in your mind, you are at the beach. In your mind, you are in a relationship that actually cares about you and is nurturing you. In your mind, you've turned everything off just so that you can survive what you're going through at the time. We also have two modes that people don't talk about a lot, and it's called freeze and fawn, right? The freeze mode is when you are just frozen. You don't know what to do. You're just there. But in that freeze mode, your emotions are cut off and your body is saying, we're going to survive this. We're going to survive this. And the last one is fawn mode, which never gets talked about. And it is where you naturally go into people pleasing. It
Yep.
is, okay, because this is so painful, I do not know how to cope with this. Let me just do everything to somewhat make you happy so that we can avoid further conflict. So I want you guys to kind of think about all of those things when we're thinking about domestic violence. So that's what's going on during the act. So then we have someone like Miss Lawton who's coming in and she's getting them from this act and she's saying, you're no longer in survival mode. You have to turn those emotions on. Can you imagine? If
Mm-hmm.
you have been in a basement for 10 years, you have put your brain on a survival mode for 10 years, which means you have numbed every emotion that you have for 10 years so that you could survive being victimized by a person. And now you are free of that. That's work. That's when the work starts because you've forgotten who you were 10 years ago. The only thing that you can remember is fight, flight, freeze, fawn. So you're remembering how to survive, but you're not remembering how to thrive. You're not remembering how to live. You're not remembering how to love. You're not remembering the key core complexes that make you who you are and what you need to be. And so the reason that I wanted to start with survival mode, and I want to be very, very clear here, because I think that oftentimes a lot of people, and I don't know if you've seen this, Miss Lawton, but a lot of people get caught in the, I can't believe this person has went back, right?
Yes, it's
And
a
so
big
they
topic
start
around
almost
here.
victim shaming, victim blaming, and doing all of
Mhm.
this. If you look at it as a person who has been on survival mode for so long, the one thing that has kept them surviving is being around this victimizer and learning how to navigate through that. That is the life that they know. And so when you're pulling them away from the life that they know or have known for that period of time, it gets scary. We talk about freedom all the time, and I am the number one freedom component. I always say, you'll always hear me say freedom time. I have a free ebook about trauma, and it's called Freedom Time as well. But let me tell you, freedom is going to cost. It's going to cost you something. It is not going to be free. It's going to cost you some relationships. It's going to cost you some mindsets. It's going to cost you some unhealthy coping skills. It is going to cost you. And so oftentimes after that survival mode kind of wears off and you get to that safety space, that's when that real trauma work takes place. But that's also when that real trauma begins to show its face. There's stages and there are phases that come with trauma that oftentimes get turned off when you're residing on that survival mode. And so once you get to a place of safety, oftentimes those things begin to turn back on. Why? Because the brain is your computer. It wants you to process. If we can process these things, we can heal them. But while it's wanting you to process those things, quite naturally, you've lived through them. The last thing that you want are these intrusive thoughts back into your mind because you feel if I've survived it, I'm okay. But no, it's not just the surviving. We need to process it. We need to heal it. We need to be able to know what seeds were planted from that are now growing that we think is our personality, but it's not our personality at all. It's actually a trauma trigger. And we are walking around with this bravado and this almost blank trauma block because we're in a consistent state of survival mode. So it takes a lot of work to get to the other side of that. It is not as easy as Miss Lawton going in, taking them out, and everything's going to be great because now we're surrounding you by good things. It's a mindset shift. It's a mindset change. It is deprogramming. It is deregulating. It is showing and psychoeducating as to what trauma is, what trauma looks like, and how you can get to the other side of what your freedom is. But it's going to cost. It's going to cost some work. It's going to cost some mindset. But I promise you, it is so worth it when you get to the other side of that thing.
Let's take a moment. Let's take a moment. Let's process, because you said so many
Sorry.
amazing things. No. You said so many amazing things. I want to invite the audience, if you have questions, to please put them down in the chat, because I know the ladies will be open to answering those questions. So if you have questions, please put them down in the chat. I want the two of you to answer this next question. Okay, because there's a lot to unpack with what you just said. I want to talk about self-blame. That's something that we don't talk about, that's self-blame. I know for me, when I personally was, I was leaving my, be mindful, I was leaving my situation, okay? There is a point, because you're taking someone that has had their activities dictated, their emotions dictated. You better not cry. You better shut up. You better not say nothing. You say something, you get hit. All of these things have been dictated for however long the period is, right? We'll keep using the 10-year in the basement as an example. 10 years, someone has told you when you can eat, when you can move, when you can go to the bathroom. You make this decision that I'm ready to leave, and all of these emotions begin to come up that you have to now deal with without your abuser telling you how to do it. It's a lot. It's a floodgate of them. But then something comes in called self-blame, and self-blame comes in, and you start thinking that you're doing them wrong. It's wrong of you to leave them. It's, if you leave, you don't love them. If you leave, you're going to abandon them. It's all these different things, and everything becomes your fault. It's your problem. It's your issue. So Lizzy and Rhonda, when you are working with people that hit that, when it's that self-blame and all these emotions are flooding in, what do you do as a clinician, and what do you do, Lizzy, in your work? How do you handle that?
Yeah, so for me, I try to hit things on a spiritual side, right? So I very much like what we do, it co-partners in what I do, right? So I'm like, you need to speak with your therapist about these things with tools that can help you cope, right? But on my end, I'm looking at it from building a relationship with them with Jesus. And so as the spirit of shame and condemnation is one of the most difficult things to navigate through, even for people that haven't been abused, right? And I've had people that have gone back multiple times. And since I'm called to it, it doesn't bother me, right? I have people that have, because you're in deception when someone's abusing you this way, then the self-blame connects to that spirit of deception, right? And so you feel like you have to deceive. And so one of the things that I do is have an open door policy for honesty. And then when there isn't honesty, being able to redirect back to, this is what God says about you. This is who God says that you are. And you may have to hear it every single day. One of the things that's just very practical that I do with most of my girls is I help them build even just like a note on their phone of the things that God says about them with scripture references. So even if they start to panic in public or in a conversation, they can pull up that note on their phone. They can go to the bathroom and say it to themselves in the mirror, right? Something that reconnects them to what is truth versus what the lie has been. So I think that self-blame is this thing that's constantly, like, I think of it as something sitting on your shoulder and whispering in your ear, like chattering, right? And so we have to shut the mouth of the accuser. And a lot of time when the accuser comes to speak to us, we can just be so internally caught up in it that I literally start asking them, what is Holy Spirit saying to you right now? Because you can see when someone dissociates, you can see when someone checks out or feels this shift, right? Because I'm talking about it just from a spiritual side. So I'd be like, oh, hey, what's Holy Spirit saying to you right now? Right? Oh, I'm not sure. Okay, well, let's check in with him and let's see what he's saying. And that's a totally different thing for most people just in their life. But it's really effective spiritually to stop the train of thoughts, right? And the Bible talks about tearing down vain imaginations, right? And some of that comes with self-blame to create a narrative to accuse you over and over and over again. So I interrupt the thought pattern with Holy Spirit and God's presence being available at any point in time, whether you're in the mall or walking your kids to the park, in the grocery store. If you get stuck, guess what? God always speaks and he can always be with you.
Oh, I love that. Oh, I love that so much. And it's so practical. So
Yes,
practical.
it is. Yes, it is. Okay, you want me to go after that? I wish I had I wish I had the lane to be able to do that, 100% spiritually. So I have to definitely blend the therapy in it. But the one thing that I love that you said was that I interrupt the thought pattern. I mean, that's heavy. And the reason that that's heavy is because most people don't know that this is actually a thought pattern. So what I do on my end is I teach what the thought pattern is. I teach what the trauma is. I show them and psychoeducate them to understand that the first thing that's going to happen in a trauma is you're going to be exposed to it. That's going to happen. You're going to go in survival mode. But now let's talk about the work that's going to come after. So after you've gotten into a place of safety, you are going to go through what I call intrusion, where the brain is like, we got to process it. We got to process it. So it is pushing it through to intrude your mind. As it's trying to intrude it, you're having dreams, you're having flashbacks, you're having thoughts, you're recognizing smells. You can smell cologne, you can smell all of these
Triggers.
things because it is now triggering you.
Yeah.
It's intruding your mind for the purpose of you being able to heal that thing. However, if you've already survived it, the last thing you want to do is be dreaming about it, having flashbacks about it, having smells that is taking you back to that place. So you naturally avoid it like the plague, and you go into what we call exactly what Ms. Lawton was speaking of, dissociative reactions, because you're avoiding it. So yes, you're triggered, but instead of you staying here, you've now taken your mind somewhere else because you don't want to think about those things. And I think that in life, we've almost trained ourselves to avoid unpleasant things and think that we can block unpleasant memories, but we don't understand that if I'm blocking on this cortex in my brain, I'm also blocking my empathy, my creativity, my level of focus. I'm blocking a lot more than what I know. And so we naturally begin to do that. Now I want to talk about, I'm going to give you a stage, but I'm going to pop back up to what Miss Johnson was speaking of when she was saying that self-blame. So what is basically happening is your brain is trying to intrude so that you can process. You're in a dissociative state so that you can avoid. Your brain and your body are connected, and it is very disbalanced and deregulated right now because your brain is saying, let's process this trauma. And then you're saying, let's avoid it. And so you're not feeling like yourself. You automatically go into, and I do this all the time, I'm going to take these glasses off and I'm going to put them back on. But it's almost as if you go into this state of negative alteration where you put on these trauma shades and the entire world you see through a traumatized view, right? Not because you're not supposed to, not because you wasn't victimized, but because you haven't been able to process, you haven't been able to regulate, you haven't been able to get yourself at a place where you're understanding what's going on. Everything you see, including yourself, including your partner, you are now seeing from traumatized lens. So that's where that self-blame comes from. The world is bad. But had I not wore that dress, he wouldn't have done that to me.
Yep.
All men are horrible.
If I had come on time.
I'm sorry, go ahead. What'd you say?
And I was just saying some of the examples. If I would have come home on time, if I would have looked at it like that, if the chicken would have been ready 10 minutes earlier, if I hadn't cooked the chicken,
if I would have been a little bit quieter, if I would have been a little bit louder. It's always if, but that blame is what you're putting on yourself because your body is dysregulated and not being able to process correctly. And because it's not processing correctly, it now has you seeing everything from a different lens that is not one of God and not reality. It's not. And so that's where you'll see that self-blame. That even in this negative alteration states, you will see self-blame. You will see some people begin to throw themselves into the same form of relationships that they just got out of. You'll see a lot of self-destructive behaviors. You see the negatively altering of who it is that you are based upon something that has happened. And so we have to be really, really careful. I'm going to jump on the spiritual side for a second here. We really, really have to be careful, because in this state is where the enemy gets busy. He gets busy. He is in your head saying all of the reasons why you deserve this, because he knows what state you're on. And you may not have been educated to it, but the enemy knows exactly where you are. So he is going to penetrate you on that level as much as he can during that time. And what do? You automatically begin to react. What does that reactivity look like? For some people, they withdraw. For other people, they get almost so extroverted that you don't even know who they are, because they don't.
Yeah.
They're spending so much time in this not fight, flight, in this intrusion, disassociative state, that they've negatively altered who they are, and they are reacting to their trauma triggers and not who they are, and not who they were destined to be, and not who God put them there to be. And so what inevitably happens is they begin to think, because this has happened for so long, that this is who Rhonda is, that this is who Rhoda is, that this is who Miss Lizzy is, Miss Nikki is. They begin to think that, and they begin to carry those traits, not knowing that, no, this is who you become as a result of the trauma you've already survived.
Yeah.
And so the way that I help my clients is, one, I'm getting ready to let you know exactly what all of these things are and what they look like. And once I let you know that, now we're going to talk about what that looks like in your life. Because when I'm in the office and I'm having this conversation with you and I'm talking to you head on and I see you going out the window, I know you're disassociating. So tell me what that feels like, so I can tell you how that comes up, what that shows up, so that when you're not in my office and you begin to disassociate and then you slip into those negative alterations, you realize this is not just you being you. This is trauma shifting your destiny again. And if it didn't kill you the first time, we're not going to let it kill you the second time. We're going to show you exactly what it's operating in. We're going to show you exactly where the enemy hides. And once we show you those things, you are going to be able to walk out of this thing differently. And so, whereas she says she's able to interrupt that thought pattern, it's like tag team. I'm loving it. I'm able to show you what it is. So I am showing you what it is, so that when she comes and interrupts it, it's like, man, I thought that was me, but that was disassociation.
Right.
Gosh, she's right. I need to be thinking about the Holy Spirit, because this was a negative alteration. I'm not even that mad. This was my reactivity to my trauma. She's interrupting what I've taught you is not you. It's actually the trauma. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. Tanel, we're coming to your questions next. Rhoda, I'm going to ask you to give, you want to say Dr. Dickens, give Rhonda the questions one by one. It's two of them that we want you to answer from a clinician point of view, because she's asking about therapy. Before we do that, because we'll give you a moment. Yeah, I was going to say, take your sip.
Let me get my sip my tea.
Yeah, get your sip in, because the next two questions are for you, Lizzy. So, we were talking about self-blame, the dissociation, all of those things. You are working with the people on that heart level, on that I'm walking through you with this level. How many times do you, because they're going through all of that, they apologize to you about everything? If they do one little bitty thing wrong, that to you is like, girl, that's regular normal. They are in constant overcompensating and apologies. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I'm just a very direct person, right? I'm very direct even as a prophet. And so I tend to have a rule of that you can't apologize to me. And they'll be like, it's open-ended. I'll let you know when you can apologize. Because if I don't, then it will be a constant, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, right? And some people, even from their cultures that they grew up in, they were trained. So this is like a larger scope of what we're talking about. People think people just end up in these domestic violence relationships. No, their parents usually started them off with something, their family. their culture, right? And so it's literally like I have to help them retrain that you don't need to apologize because you walked this way in the apartment or you left something out. There's no, you don't have to be sorry, right? So
Yeah.
I usually teach them the difference between an apology and what sorry is. So
Yes.
apologies come like repentance to turn from that way, right? It's a deeper conversation. It's something that you can even feel a little bit of what David describes in scripture as like a remorse towards what you're
Yes.
doing, and it's thought out.
Yes.
Sorry is just something to kind of like please the situation or placate, or out of fear to be
Hmm.
like, oh, I don't want to get in trouble. And so I
Yes.
usually have to go through this process of like, you're not in trouble, we're just learning. And maybe even me and you are learning in this process what's going to be good for you on a daily basis, or you're learning me, right? You came out of this situation where someone's upset with you all the time. I'm not upset. I will
Yeah.
let you know when I'm upset,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so it's more about a conversational thing. But I definitely am strong about the like, no, you cannot say sorry 50 times a day.
Right.
We're going to practice, you
Right.
know? Like you're saying
I,
sorry. Do you realize? you know?
right. I love that you're also giving them back their power and you're
Yeah.
teaching them to stand in whatever they've done, even if it was a mistake, you can stand in it. Because for people that have never been in it and you wonder, how could you keep going back and how could you? These people have been beaten to submission. You've been
Right.
beaten to saying I'm sorry. Sometimes you'll get beat until you say I'm sorry repeatedly to make the person that's doing the abuse feel good or feel better or feel empowered.
Yeah.
So when they're coming out and they're not the same person that you knew when they went into the relationship, or they're coming out and you're wondering how, you're out now. Why aren't you? That's a lot of undoing that has to be done, a lot of unlearning and a lot of reprogramming. And I love that you talk about pattern disrupting, because I call myself a pattern disruptor. Like if you're talking in your vocabulary, I'll be like, wait a minute, let's change that. Because a lot of that's going to start with your mind. It's going to be what you say because it's what you believe. But if you've had your belief taught to you, beat into you, now you have to go and unlearn all of that. So I'm so glad that that's part of I don't want to say your program. That's part of the loving, the ministry that you do.
Can I add on to the thing about going back though, because it's one of my biggest pet peeves. And
Hmm.
I think that a lot of people, even if you're watching and you've never been in any of these situations, and it's a prideful stance to even have that statement to say,
Yeah.
oh, I can't believe that someone would ever go through
Yes.
that. Or I would
Yeah.
never, right? There are moments in all of our lives that we could say, I would never do that and end up in them.
Yes.
Like just point blank period, right? And but there are also people that I've encountered that have had such heavy judgments that it is part of the reason that
Why
people
they?
run
Yep.
back. I know someone that has gone back 7 times. We are on her 8th time, and the amount of people that come to say that it's just not going to be possible is part of the reason that it
Yep.
enters back in, that I should never be able to stay out because
Hmm.
nobody believes that I can stay out. The
Right.
fact of the matter is that the statistics show most women go back 7 times. The
Yeah.
statistics show that also in America, 1 in 3 women die from domestic violence every day. We should
Hmm.
be cheering. We should be
Yes.
championing. We should be doing everything as a community to support the women that do come out, instead of saying, oh, well, I failed as a rescuer. I failed as support. I failed as a leader. When they go back, we need to look at what's the strategy to help them stay out, not
Yeah.
say, well, this person isn't worthy of help anymore, or they're too deceptive, or there's 2 sides to the story, because a lot of times that story could end in death. And I'm
Absolutely.
personally
Absolutely.
tired of it, because I feel like it is a spirit of judgment that we're
It is.
carrying when we suffer all the time in different ways. But this one, you need help to get out of it.
Yes, and it's the judgment, Rhonda. Rhoda, we're coming to you next
Mm.
for the questions for Dr. Dickens. Sorry, for Rhonda. It's the judgment. I remember being in that, and the thing about that spirit of judgment, you get to the point where you make statements like, "I'm not gonna help no more." You love it, you like it, I love it, and you wash your hands. You may be the only rescue or refuge that they can go to, but you just cut them off by your judgment. And I understand it can be tiring when you can't stop someone that you love from making these decisions. But one of the worst things you can do is to cut them off because you are being judgmental. I'm so glad that you brought that up. We're going to go to the questions with you, Rhoda, because I want Tanel to get her questions answered.
Thank you. So, Dr. Dickens, I have a question from someone here in New Zealand, and basically they were talking about how people who abuse others are very oppressive and play mind games and stuff, and they like to gaslight and things like that. So, the first thing we want to know is, what are some signs of an abuser?
Some signs of an abuse. This is going to be tough because it's really, really different across the spectrum. And what I don't want to do, and I'm going to be very, very honest, what I don't want to do is paint a picture. And if somebody doesn't fit in that picture, but you feel like you're being abused, you're like, okay, they're not. So one of the first things that I want to say when we're thinking about signs of abuse, we have to be able to trust ourselves and trust the God within us to show us some of those flags. So a lot of times we will know when something is a little bit off or something does not feel right to us, but we will kind of move past that even if we know. So one thing, trust yourself, trust the way that you're feeling. But when we're looking at abusers, we are looking at the gaslighting. We are also looking at people that lack accountability. We are looking at people especially that are looking to pull out every fault in you, but they have no flaws of their own. A lot of times what people need to know when it comes down to abuse is it does not come out as blatant abuse. It's not something that usually starts in the beginning. You're going to see aggression. You're going to see, someone who's angry. It's usually a buildup. Usually that person is what we call love bombing you when you meet them. They absolutely love you and everything that you do. And after loving you and everything that you do, there's slight variations to what they want you to do. And so it starts out over time where they're showing you all of this love. And then it's like, well, maybe you could do this a little bit better. And maybe you could do this a little bit better. And then it goes into just being abusive to you and who you are. And so what you have to look at is people that don't show accountability, people that aren't apologetic, or people that are apologetic without changed behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
That's big too. So there are a lot of things when it comes into the array of what an abuser looks like. And I'm going to be brief. There are a lot of different forms of abuse too. So we have to look at, it doesn't always start off, when we say domestic violence, I think people automatically go to a story such as being in the basement for 10 years and it being this physically abusive thing. But we have to look at things such as emotional abuse, people that are abusing you emotionally, because a lot of times that is almost the gateway into the physical abuse. It starts off emotional. And so we have to look at those things. We have to look at sexual abuse. A lot of times we don't understand consent, specifically when we're in a relationship, there's still consent. So we have to look at, the emotional abuse, the financial abuse, the sexual abuse. We have to look at all of those things.
Wow.
That was so good.
Thank you for those pointers. The second question was very similar, which is how do you know when you're actually being abused?
So it's different. So if we're looking at the physical abuse part, physical abuse can start off as well, very, very unsuspecting. It can be a push here. It can be a nod there. It can be playful, but harder than what playful is. And it gradually goes up to something that can be very, very aggressive, very, very oppressive, and something that is meant to depower you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think physical abuse, we pretty much can know when we're physically abused, when someone has started a pattern of physically abusing us. That emotional abuse is tricky, 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 tricky. And I'm going to tell you why it's tricky, because, you know, I always like to tell y'all the little places that the enemy tries to hide in, but emotional abuse oftentimes hides in little truths, right?
Mhm.
So if you have a complex about your personality or your looks or something like that, oftentimes an abuser will take something that's small, as knowing your flaw, and they will use that small thing to make an entire open wound. And once they open that wound, they then begin to penetrate every weak spot within you. So emotional abuse oftentimes feels as if you're never good enough for the person that you're with. The person that you're with is always telling you something that you need to do to be better. And we have to look at this a little bit differently, ladies, because this is not constructive criticism. This is not, you know, Rhonda, when you're speaking and I saw that, I think you need to do this. This is everything that I do. You're finding flaws in, you're finding faults in, just because that abuser is so used to looking for reasons to abuse that they're finding everything within you. And so that emotional abuse is when they look for your weaknesses and they penetrate those weaknesses. Also, one of the things that emotional can look like as well, and this is big for us, is paranoia, where it is something that is totally out of the span of your character, who you are or what you will do, but you're being consistently accused of it. And they're consistently telling you that you are doing this and why you would do this and all of these things, so much so that you are conforming your behavior as to rationalize their irrational thought process. So those things is what it looks like when we're talking about emotional abuse. And what that abuser is attempting to do is pretty much get to a place where they become the authority of your emotions. They can control when you're happy. They can control when you're sad. They can control when you're angry. They can control when you're mad. And so what it starts off as, it almost looks like a little experiment, because they need to know how to control those things. So they push buttons and see what this button is going to do and this button is going to do. And next thing you know, you're a ticking time bomb, and they're the person with the trigger, always getting you to jump and to tick and to move, because they've taken their time to learn you and to emotionally abuse you in that way.
I love everything that you said. There's one more question we have in the comments from Tanel that I want you to address. What you're talking about, I call it testing the waters and fault finding. They start off with testing the waters. What can I say that will or will not get a reaction? How much can I say? How much can I insult you and you don't respond, or you let me do it? How can I push you a little bit here? Can I play fight with you and see how aggressive I can get and see how you react? All of that is water testing, because it builds from there. Then you have the fault finding. You know, everything, including their funky mood, is your fault. And if you didn't do this, if you didn't get your hair cut like that, if you don't keep touching your braids like that, Lizzy, I wouldn't act that way. So now you spend so much time reprogramming how you act, because you don't want to set that time bomb off. You want to please them and make them happy. But you talked about open wounds. You talked about the open wounds. So they'll cut you. They're going to bust that wound open. They're going to pour all kind of salt and vinegar in the wound, but then they want to come and be the one to heal it. That's when you get the flowers and the I'm sorries and I'll never do it again and I love you and you're everything to me. Please don't leave me. So you have this dichotomy of a relationship where the person that cuts you, that makes you bleed, wants to come and put the salve and the antibiotic and the Band-Aid on it. And you love those moments, because it's in those moments when they're the most loving, they're most understanding and tender, and they're tending to the wound that they caused. The only problem with that is it just keeps cycling, and it gets worse and it gets worse, and it does not get better. If y'all are recognizing any of this and you happen to be going through that, please seek help, get some counseling. We're going to put some phone numbers up at the end of the show where you can reach out, either if you're in New Zealand or if you're here in the States, where you can reach out. But please don't think that you can do anything to change this behavior. You can't act good enough. You can't be quiet enough. You can't be loud. You can't do enough sexual favors. You can't do enough to make that stop. So please get help. The question for you, Rhonda, is Tanel says, am I saying your name right, sweetheart? Is it Tanel? It's Tanel Dickens. How can therapy support in rebuilding my self-esteem and regaining a sense of safety and trust? And after you answer, Rhonda, Lizzy, I would love for you to chime in on that one too.
So therapy can really, really help, because therapy is one of those things that's going to help you get yourself back. And one thing about trauma, again, it's so totally different from your depression and your anxiety, right? Because when you have depression, there are telltale signs where you can say, okay, this person is depressed. There are telltale signs when you're having an anxiety attack where you can say, this person is having anxiety. Oftentimes the person that's dealing with depression or dealing with anxiety, they know what their triggers are. The difference with, when we're talking about trauma is that comes for exactly who you are. And it comes when your emotions have been cut off. And if you live in survival mode long enough, you don't know how to turn those emotions back on. So the first thing that therapy is going to do is it's going to help to separate you from your trauma. It's going to help for you to be at a place where you can now authentically see who you are aside from what has happened to me. There are too many of us that we are walking around and we are just a culmination of all of our experiences. Is that true? Yes, to a certain extent. But there is something that God has authentically put within us that we can walk within, but we're too busy carrying the last relationship. We're too busy carrying our first relationship, the person who didn't love us. We're carrying all of these things and we can't see who we are. Therapy helps you to take those masks off. Be able to see exactly what this trauma is, how this has shaped your life, and how this has messed with, I hate that I said mess, but I said it, so I'm gonna roll with it because that's what it does, but mess with your self-esteem and what you are authentically in God and in yourself. And so one of the things that therapy is going to do is going to help you when it comes down to understanding exactly what is happening. The problem is we have become this very quick society where we can get everything quickly. We can get on TikTok and diagnose ourselves in 2 seconds, but we don't even know what the symptoms are, right?
Ooh.
And so we get to this place where we want to say, yeah, I was in an abusive relationship. I had trauma. What does that mean? What does that look like? How did that sit in your life? What has that done? How has that shifted the trajectory of who you are? There are some people right now alive and breathing in careers that they never would have chose and still don't love because they're still in survival mode from trauma. So the first thing therapy is going to do is psychoeducate you to exactly what that is, what that looked like for you, and how it has shaped the trajectory. Second thing it's going to do is it's going to give you relaxation skills. Why? Because for a long time you couldn't relax, right? And so if you continue walking around and not being able to relax, you're robbing yourself of the peace that you so desperately deserve. So it's going to give you some skills so that you can learn how to relax. It's going to give you skills so that you can know how to cope. It's going to help you develop a safety net, a safety structure around you so that you can be able to know who is there, when, where, and why. How I can get other resources outside of just my therapist, but I can set up this safety zone around me when I'm triggered, when I'm feeling this type of way. It's also going to do something that is very, very important, and it's called affect modulation, which is pretty much emotional regulation. If your emotions have been on survival mode and turned off for 10 years, you need to understand what true happiness is. You need to understand what true joy is. Oftentimes, especially in domestic violence situations and trauma situations, you put those negative emotions in front of us, we can read them. We can tell you exactly what they are, exactly how to act around them, exactly how to walk and do this tightrope around this negative emotion. But you say happiness and joy, and we're like, but there's nothing there.
Mm.
Why? Because we spent so much time in this survival mode that we've turned that off, and we don't know how to access that true happiness, access that true joy, access that true creativity. Oftentimes, even when we're talking about trauma, because it can be so disassociative, it has us on this level where it's very difficult to focus on one thing or another. And so there are a lot of people that have been diagnosed with ADHD, unable to focus, always appearing anxious, and it's literally just trauma. And so some of the things that therapy can do is it can break everything down to the core roots of exactly what's going on. It can psychoeducate you as to how that has shifted your life, and it can give you the tools to begin to rebuild it authentically in who you were created to be and not who you were when the trauma set in.
Wow. Wow. To
Now,
now answer
let me
your
say this is important too. You have to partner with a therapist that believes the way that you believe. And that is very important. And the reason that's very important is because a therapist that is I'm going to say that I am a Christian, and that's how I believe. So just so that I can put that out there before I say my next statement. A therapist who is a Christian therapist is going to be able to go down to those roots as exactly as I've spoke of, and talk to you about authentically who you are and authentically who God wants you to be. A therapist that may have some different type of religion or different type of belief may take you through some mindfulness, some different types of things, but you have to make sure that you are partnering with someone who believes the way in which you believe, so that you can get the result in the way in which God wants you to have that result. If that's what you believe. If that's not what you believe, that's totally fine. We still want you to go to therapy, and we still want you to get exactly what it is that you need. But it's important to find your tribe. And that is all around. It's time for us to find our tribes. That's who can help me in the therapy lane, who can help me nutritionally, who can help me physically. How can we holistically heal? Because if we don't heal, then the generation behind us is going to continue to carry what we left behind. And one of the things that Ms. Lawton was saying in the beginning is, a lot of victims have seen it. They've experienced it. Their parents have dealt with it. All of these things have happened before, but the reality is no one dug those roots out then. So then it trickled to the next generation, and we want to act like we don't even know what that looks like. Why? Because we've healed from ours. So, oh my God, how dare you?
We think we
be
have.
in a domestic violence relationship where you were.
Yeah.
And you never told me about it. You never
Right.
told me how to break it. You judged me, like you said, you judged me when I came to you with that. If we don't get to the point where we're taking accountability for some of the weeded seeds that we've left in our girls' gardens, then we are no better than the abusers. It's time for us to get to a place where we are healing authentically so we can help them heal.
That's
And if
good.
we're not ready to do that work all the way around the board, then we will look at the generation of the Dickens children, love children. God, let me just go ahead and say that is not going to be none of our portions. I'm just using this as an example. An enemy, don't touch it. But we will be looking
We'll say
at
the Smithersons. We'll say the Smithersons.
right. No, that's not getting ready to happen. But the generations after us having another life, probably without a computer screen, talking about the same things that we didn't heal and we didn't address, and we didn't help them learn how to do it. It's time for us to take a stand for our women, for our boys, for our generations after us, and show them how to heal.
I love that. Lizzy, jump on in there, baby.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna hit it from a relational standpoint. And I love something that you said about we have an instantaneous society. And one of the things that I see the most and why people don't want to stick with therapy sometimes is because when you're in domestic violence situations, all other relationships are very temporary. You can't even have them most of the time at the most extreme
Yes.
points of abuse.
Right.
And so, one of the ways that it builds you up as a person is that there's this person that you get to go see that is a safe place that you can share, that you get to be honest and transparent and a little frustrated or annoyed and it's a reoccurring place that you go to with the same person.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that I do where I, teach some of my girls how to cook from scratch or how to heat up food without a microwave, because there's a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more effort that goes
Yeah.
into it. You just don't take the box and pour it out and get it. You don't just put it in the microwave for 60 seconds and it's ready, right? And then I talk to them about, hey, do you see how this tastes different? Box potato mashed potatoes taste very different than you
Yes.
Yeah.
peeling the potatoes and boiling them and then mashing them and adding the butter and the salt and the pepper
Mm.
and the garlic, maybe, right?
Come
So
on.
you have a full flavored experience when you're making those mashed potatoes that are very buttery and creamy versus I'm heating this up very quickly just to get something in my mouth. And
Yeah.
that's how I look at therapy.
Mhm.
And I often tell them it will be one of the best slash most frustrating relationships in your life at times,
Yes.
because it's going to challenge you to be yourself
Mhm.
wholly and completely. They're not there to tell you what to do. They're there to guide you and give you tools. And when that happens, that means you have to take your own responsibility. Just like if you forget to add pepper or salt, you're not going to have seasoned food. It's going to be very bland. And that takes time. And so I think for me, with answering her question, it's worthwhile because then they're not a friend, but you can learn how to start having friends because you learn how to continually show up to talk to the same person, right? You learn how to have your emotions and how to process those and how to come back to the same subject maybe over and over again. And those are all things that we need for our self-esteem to be in adult relationships. So that's how I look at it on a relational level from the outside, and someone that's been to therapy for I've been in therapy for like 8 years. Just personally, I need it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's okay for it to be a need. It is okay for you to actually need to express yourself in this way and to get help. And sometimes in our communities, we like to be like self sufficient and act like, I can just recover, but you don't have to live with anything and think
Mhm.
that there is never a place where you can be healed with it. And
Mhm.
therapy is a great way to start that process, but it's going to be like cooking some really good mashed potatoes. It takes a little bit more effort than just putting it in the microwave.
Mhm.
That is the best
I
example.
love it.
I love how you're even
Love
teaching
it.
them how to take time and how to appreciate and enjoy. Because when you're living life in survival mode and through all that trauma, what are you enjoying except the little moments when they're finally being nice to you, which are very far and fleeting sometimes. So I love that example. That was so
Mhm.
good. Rhoda,
Mhm.
jump in.
Thanks, ladies, what you said so far. I feel like I'm just like in a university seminar with Dr. Dickens, and then Lizzie's just like giving me life of all her information. But I do want us to have like a mental pause, and I just want Lizzie to tell us what is like a significant story time you have where you've helped someone, because so many of us watching, we don't really have insight into
Yeah.
domestic violence and what people go through and stuff. So I'd love you to just walk us through a story if you can, and just give us
Yeah.
insight into your world and the world of the
Mhm.
victim.
I think, yeah, I'll preface this story by saying that every story isn't a happy ending and it isn't a fairy tale. And so, in 2020, I did a series online called Preach Princess, and everybody was locked in the house. And I went through the princesses, Disney princesses, and I talked about how they had to fight through to get to their fairy tale. And a lot of male preachers and a lot of people out there are like, oh, don't look for your fairy tale. Your prince isn't coming to rescue you. But if you actually look at each princess, they had to contend for what would be a miracle in their life. That year, 6 different women came to me online to tell me their abusive stories or what was happening to them. And, I think in the journey of walking with one young lady, there was so much tragedy and trial and people that came to try and kill her and came to try and kill her children. And it was one of the hardest things that I've ever seen, because people were just unwilling to help at every turn, because they didn't want to put their hands on it. They didn't want blood on their hands. They didn't want to touch it. They didn't want to feel so connected to such a dark thing, right? But in the process of walking away from everything that she's ever known, she was able to find her footing. And I would say, still to this day, walking out one of the most beautiful journeys with Jesus that most people wouldn't understand, wouldn't get, wouldn't feel like they could even comprehend to do, living in a completely different country, in a state now, right? Building friendships. But the process of getting there sometimes looks like a fight that no one would know how to even describe.
Yeah.
And for me, walking alongside many of them, coming from being held at gunpoint, one of the young ladies, right? Her children being held from her, seeing that moment from victimhood to victor is one of the most amazing things that can happen. But the end of the story is not that they just get out, but it's building an entirely different life. And it's through the complexities of, this is not a journey of perfection. This is a journey of understanding maybe what your call and purpose can be on the other side of it. So this young lady has her own business. She's an independent contractor. She's working in a way to provide for her children that most people would say, oh, they should just go work a retail job. There's so many times that we have dismissed people, but what my experiences have been since 2020, especially because people were locked in the house with their abusers, has been an acceleration that when Jesus is involved in it, there is so much healing and deliverance that can happen at an expedited rate that there is literally nothing the enemy can do to stop you from walking it out and walking into purpose, walking into your future, walking into your destiny, being a woman that you couldn't even see yourself. So for me, that has been one of the greatest, moments that I feel privileged to walk out in life. For me, their story means so much more than what I get to do just being a person every day, than doing hair. It's like you sit in my chair and then you've gotten up and you decided to leave. And not even only that, you decided to get away from your family.
Yeah.
You decided to get away from people trying to murder you, and you're winning.
Yes.
This is the stuff, right? And fairy tales are full of things that are harmful. But guess what? There's a goal that God wants to get you to. And the reality of that can be truth.
I love that. Lizzy, read that question on the screen, darling. That's for you. You may have already kind of answered it, but that's for you. Can you see it?
Yeah. Changed by what you did, or did you learn from it? Okay. She said, Lizzy, what's the most difficult case you've dealt with, and how were you changed by it, or what did you learn from it? Okay. Yeah, I had a very, there's been a couple, okay, I'm actually currently on a sabbatical, right? Technically, the sabbatical is relative. Um, but I had a very severe case. I was only on FaceTime with the individual for a year, and then I was able to help them get out of the situation. Their background, their culture, a lot of witch doctors, actually. So I still get threats to this day from a lot of just witches, to be point blank, period. They come on my social media. But in the process of that, there was a lot of running from different locations because the location kept getting found out. That changed me in a lot of ways because I had to then myself deal with this secondary trauma that was happening while trying to protect this family. And so that was hard. And then one of the children passed away. And I really took that very hard. I was just like, wait, this is not what was supposed to happen. Um, and then there was like all of this extra stuff from society too, because like there are authorities that do not want women to be rescued.
Yeah.
And so it changed me to a point that I had to like step away and literally take a break and take care of what I had experienced
Yeah.
myself, because I was like, but God, why? Like, why did this happen? Right. And I even then was like, okay, I get it why people don't help. I get it. Right. But that wasn't the end of the story. And I think sometimes when those things happen, we can internalize them. And so I definitely did. And to be honest, it's one of the most beautiful, although it was the most severe, it's one of the most beautiful things that I've also seen at the same time. Right. And so it's kind of difficult sometimes still for me to talk about, because, you just want to be in there to be like a perfect record, right? Nothing ever went horribly wrong. That's just what you want it to be, right? And I've been very heavily criticized for some of the ways, because it's like people say, well, if you had just taken them to a shelter, then maybe this would have happened, right? It's the what ifs. What
Yeah.
if you did it this way instead of that way? What if they didn't go here and they went there, right? And I had to resolve that within myself. But I also resolved that I could not live with leaving someone in a situation where their entire family would have died. I
Yeah.
could not resolve turning a blind eye to another woman who needed help, no matter how difficult it was. I could not resolve not picking up the phone, even if it was the seventh time that they went back. Like, that's how it changed me, to know that this is so serious that it equals lives.
Right.
And I can't control every part of it, but the parts that God tells me to be a part, I'm going to continue to show up. So that's how the young lady that's with me ended up being with me, because I said, I'm not going to give up on what God said to do. No matter what the circumstances end up being, it's all in his hands.
If y'all are enjoying this conversation, drop something, hearts, something, fire emojis, drop something down in the comments and let these ladies know how much you appreciate the pour that they are doing, the level of grace and passion that you all have for what you do, the level of compassion and empathy, the level of education, the level of listening, the level of tenacity. It is profound what you all are doing, and I'm so grateful that Rhoda reached out to the two of you to be the guest for today. A few people were asked, you all said yes, and you're here, and that's not by mistake. It's definitely by divine order, and there are no words to express how much we appreciate the level of vulnerability and pouring that you all are doing right now, that is helping so many people. And I appreciate your family being on. Your family is on it, just rooting hard up in these comments.
Gotta love them. Got
Love
to love
it.
them.
Love it, love it. So we're gonna start wrapping up the show. I would love to have y'all on for 2 more hours, because there's so much to unpack, so much meat, and then so much more information to be given. But before we end it and tell everyone how they can get in contact with and everything, Rhoda, ask what your final question maybe, or your final thoughts, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. I want to ask you, Lizzy, for those of us who may meet people who say, hey, you know what, like, I'm experiencing abuse, or if we visit someone and we see that they're being abused, what are some practical things we should do from jump all the way to maybe wanting to rescue them like you do? Like, what can we do?
Yeah, I think it's a sliding scale there. I would say, don't jump right in. That's what I usually tell people. Don't jump right in unless you know you're about it, okay?
Are you called to that? Yeah.
Because I got these hands, okay? I'm not afraid to swing, whether
You
you're a
about
man or not.
Yes.
it. I'm
Just
with
to be
stuff.
just to be really real about it, right? I also got a lot of people I could call to kind of back me up. But I think if you see someone that's in abuse, one of the most powerful ways that I've connected with people too is just being a friend, right? Being friendly and being open and not taking things personal, not taking their absence personal, not taking every time that they cancel a tea or coffee with you, not taking it personal every time they message you and then you message and they don't respond. Like
Yeah.
really being a encourager and a person with an open door can be so helpful, because I think a lot of people want to push and like kind of be forceful, like you're an abuse, get out, right? And that doesn't really work from my experience. Because it's like you're taking them from a codependency from someone they feel that they love, right? So the number one thing is to be a friend. Number two is that you can, you know, partner with other places and people to come up with a plan of how to sew into this person's life, right? You just want to make sure that your motives and intentions are very well set within, if you're a believer in God, right?
Yeah.
And that way you won't be disappointed. So when it comes to generosity and maybe giving opportunities, right? Not being disappointed if the opportunity is turned down or misused. I think it's just really important to keep that heart posture available. The third thing is that if you're going to be available to get somebody or allow them in your space and all these things, remember what we've talked about tonight, and that it is a whole, like it's an involvement in a universe that you don't have any understanding of, and you're really going to need assistance and help, and you're going to actually need to be a patient person. You're going to actually need to understand that it's not about you, it's about what that person has been through. And that, yes, you can have boundaries, but you need to actually consider that it is sacrificial, that
Yeah.
you will be laying down parts of your life to do this, and that it's, if it's something you're called to do, that God will give you the strategy, but also he will help educate you. So there's a lot of things that I had to educate myself in. So if you're interested in being someone that operates in this way, start educating yourself, start looking at information, start reading, start speaking with people that have been through it, right? The third thing is I think, or the fourth thing I would say, is that you can pour into women that maybe have come out of a certain place in this, right? You can pour into them so that they can do the work, right? So that you each one reach one and teach one, right? So if you teach them in a certain area, you mentor them in that area of their life, they can go get other people too. No,
Yes.
it's not always so linear to just have to be that person, right? We need other people that are like me, but we also need people that are working in a network to surround those who need help from all areas in life. So that's how I would say the sliding scale.
I love that. What part of the village can you be a part of?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Because
good.
maybe you're the sister that braids the kid's hair, right? Maybe you take the pain point of the kid's hair not being done off, even though if you know he's going to trip out about that, maybe you do that part for a while, right? And you give her space to breathe.
Yeah.
But you can't always be everything to snatch out until someone is ready. You
Right.
can be a helping hand.
Yeah. I love when you mention what you can do when they come out. You may be the one that can teach her how to cook. You may be the
Right.
one that can teach her how to clean, different ways she can discipline her child, or different ways that she can be a better mother. You know, if she's
Mm-hmm.
interested in parenting differently than she may have had to parent when she was in that situation. I love the question Rhoda asked, and the response. What part of the village can you play? What role can you play now? And now that they are out, because you may not be able to be the rescuer, but your
Mm-hmm.
position in rescuing may be when they're out, this is what you can rescue in their life now. I love that answer.
Are having fun, like being the fun person, right? Let's go to a movie, like be a
Taking her to get her
girlfriend.
nails done. Yeah.
But nails done. This is how you can do your hair, right? We all these things drop when domestic violence comes in. Going shopping. This is how you feel safe shopping again. Going to
Yeah.
the grocery store, like learning how to actually get groceries, but not making it like I'm teaching you. Like
Right.
I'm doing this with you. We can do it
Yeah.
together. Let's plan together like that. It's so much more powerful if we just did that more.
I love that. Every time you mention that, I hear partnering, but I also hear when Moses had to hold his hands up when the Israelites were fighting,
Mhm.
when he couldn't, they would come on both sides and they would help him. And sometimes you need to be on someone's side to help them. If they're leaning on the right, be there on the right. Be there
Yeah.
in the way that they need you to be. And if you pray, God will tell you. Don't be there in the way that you think you need to be there. Find out how they need you to be there. So thank you for that. That was so good. That was so good. You have a lot of people that have been chiming in saying, y'all, that this is amazing. Someone said this needs to be a retreat. They've been giving y'all some fire and heart emojis. Thank you so much, Auntie Lane. She said, congrats for a great first season. Linda said, be a part of the village. Love this. A lot of great, great comments that are coming in. Rhoda, did you have any other questions or comments?
So obviously our Dr. Dickens is a therapist. So many people are hesitant to get therapy, or feeling ashamed to. So what encouragement can you give them, and how can we get therapy from you?
So what I like to say a lot when it comes down to therapy is that oftentimes if we have a pain in our leg, we don't hesitate to go to the doctor. If we have a crook in our neck, we don't hesitate to go to the chiropractor or wherever we need to go. And therapy is just when you feel that something is off balance with your emotions. And there's nothing wrong with it. It does not mean that you're crazy. It does not mean that you need to even have a diagnosis. A lot of times when you go to the right therapist, what we do is we give you the least restrictive diagnosis as possible. And that's something like an adjustment disorder. You're having a hard time adjusting from one city to another, or one place or one thing to another. But I think that the first step is just being open to going in and letting out some of the things that you're carrying. And one of the things that I love about therapy is the partnership of it. So you come into my office and you are carrying the weight of the world on your shoulder. You're laying all of that in front of me, and we are sitting down together, Indian style, and we are sorting through this stuff, and we are organizing, and we're putting things where they need to be, and we're healing the things that need to be healed. And you're walking out of that lighter because now you have somebody who is partnering with you through this journey. And that is so, so necessary. And so I think that I love that we are now in a state that therapy is a little bit less taboo, but I do want to say it is literally being able to get an outside perspective and someone who can see things that you're not able to see at the time, and help you to kind of give you tools to get where you need to be. But understand, therapy or no therapy, you are the expert of you. There's no way that you can come into my office and then all of a sudden I am Rhonda Dickens, LCSW, expert of Rhoda Love. That's never going to happen. But what I can do is I can give you tools to better execute who you are and what your position is in life. And when it comes to therapy, I am the clinical director at Rising Hope Clinical Assistance, and that is in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I don't know how many people from North Carolina are on here, but if you're looking for a good therapist, I train quite a few therapists there in that agency, and they would love to help you specifically with trauma. One of the things that we saw right before COVID is that we were getting an array of a lot of different diagnoses, but the root of it was trauma. And so a lot of times people were going through medication after medication, therapist after therapist, because everybody was treating the symptoms, but not going down to know that that root is trauma and being able to treat and heal that. So everyone within the practice that I direct is trained in some type of trauma modality so that we can go down to the root and pluck it out so that you guys can have fresh new gardens growing.
I love that. Lizzy, what are your final words or your final thoughts for today?
I just want to tell someone that's watching that has been contemplating leaving, or if they're being abused, that you're not crazy and that life gets better. That there will be a lot of hard moments that people will talk about. And even on here, we talked about a lot of the difficulties of it. But there is so much joy on the other side of this. There is so much hope on the other side of this. And those dreams that you had before this began can still be a reality, that you can be safe and that you are loved way more than you already could think, ask, or imagine to be. That there's literally this amazing, peaceful place that God has prepared for you. and he wants to do it with you, and that there will be people that show up to do it with you too. Even if it seems like it is so dark, there is a way out. And I want you to hear that. And if you have to play this back over and over and over again until you believe it, know that every time you hear it, God remembers you and God sees you today. You can do this.
I love that. Tell them about the phenomenal women's podcast.
Yes, so I have a podcast, and one of the young ladies on there, her name is Ellie. She's actually a survivor as well. And she talks a lot about relationships. The other young lady's name is Gloria. And we just believe in empowering women to be beautiful and powerful at the same time. So there's a whole first season that you can binge. In the second season, we've been having a lot of fun. It's on love and relationships. So we've been going through Love is Blind, season 4. So if you want to laugh, but also learn some things and then also hear about our personal stories, it's a place that you don't have to worry about being stuffy or like churchy or anything. Yes, we talk about God a lot, but also we get down to the real nitty gritty of what be going on in these men's lives when they be trying to talk to us, you know? So it's a safe place for you to come and hang out, so you can check it out.
I've listened to a few episodes. Y'all should go check it out for real, for real. She has a YouTube channel that's called Traveling While Mixed. Please check that out as well. And all of her social media handles are Lizzy P Lawton, Lawton. We cannot thank you enough for being on here today. Thank you so much, Rhoda. Thank you for this hookup, child. It was
Thank you for
everything.
having me.
Everything. Okay, Miss Rhonda, what are your final words and thoughts that you would like to leave with us today?
Listen, I think Miss Lizzy said absolutely everything that I would have said. She's absolutely correct. Only thing that I'm going to say is that it's freedom time. It's time to get free, and there is freedom on the other side. And all you have to do is take a step towards it. And I promise you, you are going to have people that are going to partner with you along the way. But it is time to get free, folks.
Oh, I love that. Talk to us a little bit about the Oasis of Healing. That's your website, but that's also how people can connect with you on social media. Tell us about it.
It is. And so Oasis Haven of Healing, it's very interesting because when COVID started, and I'm going to, of course, be brief. I say that every time. When COVID started, what I realized is that we were all in the house and we all were kind of plagued by this thing that was threatening our breaths. And in the midst of that, the world watched a man get his breath taken in front of us. And there was, almost little to nothing that was done about it. And I realized that we were in a very traumatized society. And so what I did was I developed a ebook for people that were not able to go into therapy, but felt like they were being traumatized and they were dealing with trauma. It's a free ebook. You can go and it can really, really help you to start your journey. It gives you some relaxation, some coping. It lets you know that psychoeducation of what trauma is, but it pretty much partners with you until you're able to partner with a therapist. And so Oasis was pretty much developed for trainings for schools. The biggest places that I think need the mental health trainings are the schools and the churches, just to get in there and kind of talk about what I'm seeing that's coming into my office and how we can all partner together, again, to not lose a generation of us. So that is Oasis Haven of Healing. You can find it. The website is oasishavenofhealing.com. You have at Oasis Haven of Healing on Facebook and Instagram. And
Thank
again,
you.
thank you guys for having me.
Thank you again, Rhoda. Thank you for the hookup, girl. Everything. Rhoda, what are your final thoughts about today?
I appreciate today's show. I'm very grateful. I've never had to personally go through a domestic violence situation, but I have been meeting people who are going through it. So I'm so grateful for what both of you ladies shared. It was very practical, insightful, and very, very helpful. I have some people who are watching this, and we're in New Zealand right now. So I do want to just give them some resources for people who need help here. So the first organization is called Shine, and they are an amazing, huge company nationwide who help women and families going through violence. So you can call them 24 hours, 7 days a week on 0508 744 633. And they have advocates who will walk you through everything. They can get police involved, medical help. They have emergency accommodation if women and families want to escape. And they also have programs for kids and children. And they also train people how to help people who are going through domestic violence. So Shine is amazing. The second organization I want to recommend is Women's Refuge. And they also have a 24-hour crisis line. You just call 0800 733 843. And their website is full of amazing information. They actually do home visits, community visits. They can get you to safe houses 24/7. So if you're in trouble, you just call them and they can get you out. They work with schools, legal people, doctors, and lawyers. They refer you to counselors, and they also educate people on helping those with domestic violence as well. And lastly, I have a big sister in the Lord called Shilpa. She runs Diamonds in the Rough, and she helps women who are age 13 to 30 years old, who are mothers, escape from domestic violence situations, and she counsels them. She's a clinical psychologist, and so you can contact her on 022 685 7251. Also, Shilpa is about to open up her own trauma-informed consultancy. So if you're over 30 years old, she can still help you, and she'll have programs available for older women soon as well.
I'm going to pop them back up on the screen one more time. You can run this back in the replay so you can get this information and get these numbers and these websites. Please reach out if you need some help. My last final thoughts are, as the two of you were giving your final shares, Lizzy and Rhonda, what I heard was the harvest is plenty and the laborers are few. Would you be willing to be a laborer? When we're talking about the village and finding ways that you can help, you can be a laborer. Sometimes when I'm praying for someone going through a situation, I say, God, send the laborers, right? Because God knows exactly who to send and what they have to send into their life to meet them where they are, to help them. Would you be willing to be a laborer? And you hit on that earlier, Lizzy, in ways that people can help if they can't do exactly, because what you're doing sounds so amazing and so fantastic and magical, but there's a real reality to it. And you were like, if you're not called to this, this may not be what you want to do. I'm about this, but you may not be. So here's what you can do. So you gave us very practical things that can be done, as well as you, Dr. Rhonda, as well as you gave us some very practical tips. You gave us, information from a clinician point of view, but both of y'all brought Jesus, y'all brought the Spirit, you brought heart and passion into the conversation today. And thank you so very, very much for the work that you do. Rhoda, thank you again for reaching out to your friends and asking them and getting them here today, because it was an amazing way to end this season. I do have some information that I want to put up on the screen here in the States. If you are in a domestic violence situation, or if you're wondering if you are, you can contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at thehotline.org. The number is 1-800-799-SAFE or 7233. Let me say this. I love the way this website is designed. I won't go into it because we don't know who's watching, but it's safe. And you will see when you go to it, it's safe. Y'all know what I'm talking about. With that being said, y'all, this is the end of this episode. Again, we thank you all so very much. If you all have enjoyed it, don't just put something in the comments. You saw their social media handles. Reach out to these amazing women. Send them messages. Encourage them. I mean, if God leads you to sow, but encourage these women, because this is work. This is ministry at its finest, right? They're not on pulpits, but they are out there in pulpits, and they are ministering with their whole lives. Ladies, thank you so very, very much. Rhoda, thank you for an amazing first season of the Dear Younger Me podcast. Is there anything that you want to say closing us out?
Thank you, Lizzie. Thank you, Dr. Dickens. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you, Coach Nick, for an amazing season 1 of our show. It's been wonderful, and you guys can go back on our YouTube channel to see the live streams we've done before this one. We also have a podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts with the same name, Dear Younger Me, so you guys can listen to those episodes. We've covered so much, from domestic violence today to parenting to femininity to relationships to marriage.
Dating,
So
yeah.
many different
Self-esteem,
topics.
yes.
Right. It's been amazing. So I'm grateful for an awesome season 1. And I thank our guests for just adding so much value to our finale today. Like, what a way to end season 1. God bless you guys.
Thank y'all so much. We're out. Thank y'all. DYMP gang. Y'all are amazing. We appreciate you for being here today. Y'all have an amazing rest of your weekend. Bye. Thank you, ladies, so much. Y'all hang tight.